Good morning, everybody. Good evening, everybody, depending on where you are. This is Dr. Bob with the Vitality Project with my partner in arms, Caira, from Lockdown Open Up, and it's Vitality Unlocked. Caira's in Cape Town, South Africa, and I'm in Newport Beach, Southern California. And we're really honored this morning to have a very special guest, Carmen Williams, also from Cape Town. Our topic today, I've just published online. I'm just taking from the title from your incredibly well-written article. I want to recommend everybody to it, Carmen. In fact, I'll send it out on Vitality Project, and I'm sure, Caira, you've already done this with Lockdown Open Up. The topic is the government is failing its people on mental health. And I couldn't agree more, but I'm very interested to hear from you, Carmen, because this is your deep expertise and personal experience. And just for you to know, Carmen, Caira and I also talk very personally here and vulnerably about our experiences around mental health issues generally, around addictions more specifically, but we can open it up to include depression, anxiety, PTSD. We've discussed gender-based violence here. It's all open territory, and I think it's really timely. So really honored to have you, Carmen. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very glad to be part of this discussion.
Yeah, thank you. I'd love to hear you, just if you're okay with it. Caira, is it okay if we just have Carmen introduce what's the essence of your interest in this area, the points that you covered in your article? Whatever's on the front burner for you, Carmen, will be on the front burner for Caira and me, okay?
Okay, great. So in the article, I mentioned that I myself am mentally ill. I have severe major depression, I have a panic disorder, and CPTSD. And with that, when I lost my job in 2018 and no longer having medical aid, it meant that I needed to rely on the government to get medication and have assistance to look after my mental health.
Yes.
And I was already scared before I started going because I thought, this is not going to be great because I've heard horror stories. And then a friend of mine's parents were like, no, go to the local clinic, it'll be great. They give you medication, everything is all fine. And not realizing that they're used to that kind of thing. And for them, it's easy because it's free. And the kind of medication that I was on was not the kind of medication that they were getting at the clinic. And horrible experiences, waiting hours and hours and hours in a line to speak to someone for 10 minutes, and someone who you don't know from a bar of soap, and them sitting there going, so, are you suicidal? Why do you say you have these things? Who diagnosed you? What happened? And, just sitting there and going, if I tell this person, that I have panic attacks and whatever, are they going to cart me off to some sort of mental institution? What's going to happen next? At least that's what I think that the average person is going to be thinking. And it really opened up my eyes to how bad the state of mental health care is in South Africa. And then I started doing research about it, and I had pitched a similar article to another website last year around this time, but unfortunately it never came to fruition. And then with lockdown happening and the COVID-19 pandemic, it really brought it home again.
Yes. How
badly mental health is being neglected globally, but especially in South Africa. Because here, I think it's now 3% of our overall healthcare budget, not even our overall budget for the country, just our healthcare budget. 3% of that is allocated to mental health care. And that for me was already a sign of, this is how little our country actually cares about our actual state of being.
Yes.
And that was, it was quite shocking. And even looking at the numbers, I knew it was bad, but I didn't realize it was that bad. And so I felt that I needed to write a piece highlighting that, and also highlighting the fact that since the beginning of the pandemic, so many more people that I know who are neurotypical and don't have mental health issues normally have been saying, wow, people feel like this every day. People wake up feeling like this. People have to function like this. I was like, yeah, welcome to a day in my life. Welcome to what it's like on a normal day,
Yes.
waking up half an hour before your alarm goes off and thinking, how do I prepare myself for the day?
Yeah.
And I don't know if you're aware of a thing called spoon theory, but
say it again. Say it one more
into
time.
that as well, maybe. But it's basically the idea of spoon theory. So it's basically I'll send you a link to it, but it's
okay. Thank you. Yeah.
This woman came up with the idea because she has lupus, and she tried to explain to a friend of hers how exactly that works. So she took all the spoons that were in the diner and said to her friend, okay, you have 12 spoons. For each thing that you do during the day, you use a spoon. And she explained to her all the things she had to do just in the morning alone. And by the time she got through half of her morning, half of the spoons were gone.
Yeah.
She said all of the spoons are units of energy. And for a mentally ill person or physically disabled person, that is what it is like to have to function on a normal day. Yes. But we're still held to the standard of a neurotypical or able-bodied person. And we don't necessarily always have the same resources, and we don't necessarily have access to medication or therapy or any of those other things. But we're told that we're not allowed to talk about how badly we're affected by our mental health, how there are some days where, because you're high functioning, you're sitting there doing your work and, pretending that everything is fine, but inside you're incredibly, incredibly sad. And people don't realize that that is a massive problem.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. And I would love to read more about the spoon theory. It makes complete sense. Thank you. Caira, I'd love to hear any thoughts. I know you've been in conversation with Carmen. I have a lot of thoughts and questions, but I want to prioritize you, Caira, because I kind of talked right through you this morning. I apologize for that.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that sort of I obviously didn't want to interrupt as the both of you were speaking, but I think because what's nice about this project with Vitality Project Unlocked around the globe and drawing the parallels between our different countries, but the same topics during lockdown. So in this case with mental health, is that I think in South Africa, and that's not to say that our problems are worse but they are different. It's a sort of common, the pattern is that whether we're talking about gender-based violence or racial issues or addiction, there's very different factors and variables. And the one thing that I thought about it the other day, and you've just made me think about it again now, is I think we South Africans have become incredibly desensitized to things, especially where things like crime is involved. And I don't know about necessarily mental health specifically, but we take things like access to, if we don't have access to healthcare, basic healthcare and education, we're just desensitized to it. That's the way of life for us. So the fact that the government says, well, they're going to put stringent measures into place to start facilitating, better efforts and drives and initiatives. I mean, we just all roll our eyes and go, oh yeah, okay, and we give up. We're exhausted by any sort of real conscious effort to do it, and we've now all we've withdrawn for so long before lockdown, and kind of given up all hope and took matters into our own hands, I think, and in our own capacity where we could, those of us who could, to try and rely on our own sources and means to get access, but then of course there were those then who fall back, and then our whole equality and divide becomes a much bigger issue. So those who could help themselves were jumping ahead in leaps and bounds, so they were able to access medication and proper healthcare, and those who weren't is our very reason why we've had such a massive issue with addiction, mental illness, lack of education. And now I think what we're seeing in South Africa, I mean, our government, and this is why I think I say with all of our, the protesting and stuff going on at the moment, and what Carmen's headline, our government was never ready for the mental health fallout. Our government was never ready for the COVID plans because we are so complex and multi-diverse with so many, our history in the first place. That was, we are miles away from ever resolving things. So I think when we sat down and we all, sort of clapped hands at government's great initiatives when we announced we were going into 21 days of lockdown, and these were the plans to help everyone and the funding and all that, there was so much that wasn't thought out. And I know we had to do what we needed to do, and we needed to think quickly because there was this virus. But I do feel that mental health was probably, for me personally, one of the biggest overlooked factors when you think about it, and it affects everything. I mean, addiction and recovery in lockdown, and you look at people. I mean, I'm just using travel and tourism as an example because I'm in that industry and so are family members. But having your mental health navigated by government's continual flip-flopping of decisions. One day you have a job, the next day you don't. Then, oh, wait, no, we're going to open the economy again. And then, God forbid, you're a smoker as well in South Africa, and you have to try and calm your nerves by, whether you're going to be able to buy a cigarette legally or not, or give up smoking or not, whether it's out of your choice or not. So there's just so much that made me think, like, is anyone thinking about mental health above anything else? And if they are, if we're gonna screw around with people's decision freedom of choice, can we at least just give access to some sort of mental therapy help, like on government's behalf? Can we allocate some of the solidarity fund and people's tax money to giving mental health care online, for Pete's sake, or something? In the rural areas and the village areas, like, people who can go out and I don't know, make a plan, spend time. All our resources, all these big conferences, people are sitting and talking about banning more things and restrictions. You can start with mental health. So that's when your headline that our government was never ready for the mental health fallout from COVID-19. That's, for me, what this whole, if anyone's going to protest, it needs to be about that.
Yeah, that's definitely one of my feelings, is that, I mean, in the article I say, to use our generation's vernacular, they've been doing the least. Honestly, they've been doing the least. And it's ridiculous. There was a national plan put together that was supposed to be from 2013 until 2020. They had 7 years to put this plan into place and make it more effective, make mental health a more central point in our country, in our healthcare system, make it a focal point, make people see that it matters, give people access to these things. And this was obviously thought out before 2013 already, because the plan started in 2013.
Right.
And still, we've got this. I mean, in 2017, we had 𝗵𝗶𝗹𝗹𝗵, where hundreds of people died because of mistreatment and ill care and miseducation of the people who were supposed to be looking after them. And it's disgusting that even had to happen. And the fact that, for me, the worst part is that not even the essential workers, the very people who were on the front line from day one of lockdown, were given access to mental health resources. They were never said, okay, you know what, here is free counseling for you. It was never arranged with professional psychologists who might normally be private, and asking, could they donate their time and services, possibly help, our frontline people, the doctors, the nurses, the paramedics, those people, like teachers who now have to go back to school and scan these kids and take their temperatures, and they stare death in the face every day too. I mean, one of my best friends is a teacher, and she has to go to school every day and is part of the team who takes the kids' temperatures, and they have to wear masks and have to sanitize in between lessons and all these other things. And it holds you in fear all day. And the kids are learning through this. So the kids should have access to, mental health resources, but the teachers especially, because how do you teach children when you yourself have been so affected by this pandemic?
Carmen, I have a question for you. I have a question for you, and I know you will have reflected on this. And Caira, it's also for you. Do you guys have a sense of how it is or why it is in South Africa? And I want to add the US, by the way, for sure, but that's another conversation, maybe. We'll see. There's nothing that you wrote about, Carmen, in your article that doesn't apply to the US, even down to the statistics you cited. I'm aware of the statistics here in the US, and they really parallel each other. I don't disagree with you, Caira. There's a different history, for sure, and complexity with South Africa that differs from the US, but we both share this stigma around mental health and services and so on. But I wanted to ask you, Carmen, how do you understand this this lack of prioritizing of mental health? 3% of the healthcare budget in South Africa being allocated to mental health services. Where does that come from? What sustains that? What keeps that going, even though it's obviously not only not humane, but also incredibly counterproductive in terms of the national welfare of South Africa? And again, I'll add the US to this. Any thoughts about that, Carmen? Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, it comes down to the fact that we were never told to prioritize mental health.
Yeah.
And the thing is, especially in a country like South Africa, with our complicated history and the trauma that we've gone through, and the fact that we still have so many race issues to work through, and everything else that's going on, and the rest of the things that we're trying to fix in the country. We're trying to get better housing for people. We're trying to fix overpopulation of certain areas. I mean, the Group Areas Act that happened, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s has still messed up the way people live today. And there are areas where people of color live where it's completely overpopulated. But areas that are more affluent aren't. And that also has an effect on mental health, for instance.
Of course it
but
does.
The focus there is more on, okay, we need to get these people housing. And well, yes, that's important because you need housing, because you need to feel safe. You need to have a place where you can lie your head at night and there's not 3 other people sleeping next to you because there's no space for anything else. Or where you can possibly self-isolate because you don't live in a 1-bedroom shack with 5 other people.
Right.
Those kinds of things. And it's just, I think at the end of the day, it's because we've been told that there are more important things than sitting talking to some doctor about how your father beat you when you were 5 and it had this effect on your life. Because when you've been told that you have to work extra hard for everything that you have, you don't have time to stop and feel sorry for yourself. You need to keep going. You need to keep working. You need to keep putting food on the table. This is why a lot of people of color who are mentally ill deny that they are mentally ill, because they don't have the time to go and stand in the line at a clinic and waste a day's pay getting medication. They probably won't work anyway. So what is the use? To have a doctor tell them that they're crazy and be disregarded. Because I've gone through a lot of therapy in the last 10 years.
Good for you.
Thank you. I've done a lot of work on myself. I've learned coping mechanisms. I've done unlearning. I've done relearning. I've found out where my traumas come from. I found out that I don't just have PTSD, I have CPTSD. I've learned those things about myself through a lot of hard work. But there are people who are not ready to do that. I have previous partners who don't know how to do that.
Me too.
And because of that, that's why the relationship ended. And it's those kinds of things that happen because we're told we're not allowed to be mentally ill. You are not allowed to deal with those things. You are not allowed to break down and have that time for yourself where, You can say, I'm not okay. I'm not all put together. And I'm not perfect. And it's not a white picket fence and 2.4 children and a little Prius in the driveway. It's complicated. It's messy. It's life. You know, that not everything is perfect. And it's okay to admit that you are becoming a better person and that you are learning and changing and evolving. And that also, you're not always going to find the right therapist immediately, because you hardly ever do. It's like, you know, finding a good pair of shoes or a good boyfriend. It takes a while. It's true though. And even the right medication. I mean, God, I can't tell you how many pills I was on before I found the right mix. And then I lost my medical aid and I went off them. And that was the worst year of my life. Now back in medication and figuring out again what works, what doesn't, what helps the depression but doesn't help the anxiety.
Right, exactly.
Having both is very complicated, because the one makes you not want to do anything and the other one makes you want to do everything. So one overthinks, the other one doesn't want to do anything. And that meshing those two together is a very, very complicated process. And I just think that at the end of the day, we've been told that, especially people of color, that we are not allowed to be mentally ill. There's such a massive stigma in communities of color. And with Black and brown people, it's especially that, like I made a remark to Kelly earlier that, that's for white people, you know, that kind of thing. I mean, we'll see it as funny because it's a joke, but also it's not, because that is what the thinking goes, is that it's a luxury to be mentally ill and to take care of your mental health, to do a mental health checkup, to do a mental health cleanup, to go and get medication, to go and have therapy, to work out whatever childhood trauma you had or generational trauma or whatever it is. Because especially as people of color, we have those things, we have that baggage. And whether you've been a victim of crime once in your life because you got mugged, or whether you've had a series of horrible traumas happen to you, or whether you've been a victim of gender-based violence, whatever it is, or whether, you know what, you had a okay childhood, but also an unavailable parent, you still need therapy. I think everyone needs therapy at some point in their lives, you know, just to sort of clean up the closet, you know, clean out the skeletons at least, because it's good to do that mental health cleanup and just do a little spring clean and at least know where you stand. Because how are you going to evolve as a person if you are always in the same place and you never change your thoughts?
It's so interesting. I mean, I haven't been I never went for any sort of like proper therapy or counseling or anything like that. And I mean, so Carmen and I used to work together.
Wonderful. I'm glad to know that.
Online publication. That's how her and I connected. And that's where I started writing about my my dysfunction growing up. And then with my mother, losing my mother to anorexia, and then my history with family addiction. So it took me a long time, only in the last 3 years, I started seeking an education on on all of this to understand why I was wired the way I was wired, because I realized that my life I had potentially delayed my life a little bit through unhealthy coping mechanisms, and so I'm trying to relate a little bit without because I mean our situations are obviously very different, but with that delay, I think with getting help so that we can move forward to acknowledge our losses and then go, okay, right, this is a really shitty situation, this is what's happened, it's crap, what can I do to, in my capacity, okay, I can't, no one's coming to save me, what can I do now in my capacity to make it better? What can I stop doing to make it worse? So I seek Al-Anon and all that stuff. I wrote about it. But that helped me then at the time for a certain amount of time. And it's helped me now up until lockdown to understand myself and my family and my mom and grief and all that sort of stuff. And then in lockdown, I neglected all of that because I went into this panic survival mode and got angry because I'd come so far independently without I had no help from anyone else to fall back on. And then COVID happened and I was losing my job. I had no medical aid, got rid of medical aid, had to get rid of everything. I was going to lose my house, whatever. So I was really angry. And I was like, am I going to have to go back to this again? And then it became that I ticked into that survival mode, but also that desensitized sort of, oh, well, this is just the way it's going to be, we're like conditioned to, for me, I think it's like sort of maybe it's the adult-child thing, I'm not sure, but also the combination of, it's like pandemic mode is entrenched in us a little bit.
Yeah, I think that it's, what's the term I'm looking for? I've spoken to someone about this before, but basically it's like a sort of trauma exhaustion. And it's when these things happen to you constantly, where you've constantly got to fight for something, or you've constantly had really bad shit happen to you. And you're just like, I can't do this anymore. I can't. I'm done. I'm giving up now. But it cannot be this hard all the damn time. Like it's impossible. And eventually you get to the point where you're just like, screw it. I don't care anymore.
See, what made it hard is that I felt like, and I wouldn't want to get into too much of a discussion of this, but I found it difficult as a white female. Like I couldn't vent how difficult things were for me because, and to the few people I did, they were like, okay, but stop moaning because you sound like privileged Karen. And I was like, oh my God, like, I don't think, because of my story, people don't know, a lot of people didn't know at the stage, like I was like, but this is my worst. This is my losing everything, everything that I tried to gain so hard for in the last 3 years. I'm losing it all. And I can't learn about it because there's always going to be people far worse off than me. But to me, at that moment, it was the most devastating. I was really angry.
I mean, this is also, and I literally had this discussion with a friend of mine yesterday. He is a man of color, but he recently lost a family member of his to COVID, and he is now in mourning. And we started talking about the process of mourning, and I said to him, I know that you're not okay, and I can tell. But he said, yeah, but I'll be fine though, I got off easy compared to most people. And then I said to him, listen, I'm sending you an anti-voice note now because I'm telling you, this is not okay. Yes. You are allowed to have feelings. You are allowed to feel these things. And it is okay. Your pain and hurt does not negate anybody else's.
It's beautiful.
Yes, don't carry on as if though, that because you're in a position of privilege, that, oh my God, it's so much worse than, someone who lives in a township and has to live in a one-bedroom shack with 5 other people. No, it's not worse than that. But it doesn't mean that it's not real for you and that pain isn't real for you. I mean, if I was losing my house and lost my job and didn't know where my income was going to come from for the next year, we might be in lockdown for the rest of 2020 or for half of 2021. We don't know yet because we don't know what COVID-19 is going to do, and it's scary. And if that had happened to me, I would have been like, fuck. I would have been completely shattered. Yeah. So the fact that you managed to turn it around is also an amazing thing for you, and I'm really, really happy and proud of you that you did that. Mm-hmm. And I hate this thing of everyone going, there's someone worse off than you. Yeah. You need to be grateful for what you have.
Right.
the sun will shine again kind of thing. That toxic positivity does not help anyone.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. That's great. Toxic positivity is right.
Yeah.
We have this saying. We have this saying in the U.S., and I wonder if we got it from you in South Africa, or maybe vice versa. Oftentimes, Carmen, I'll say to somebody, "I'm so sorry that this happened." For example, I'm dealing with families who are losing family members to overdoses right now, and it's happening weekly. And sometimes the response is, "Well, it is what it is, Bob." And my response to them is not dissimilar from you with your friend. And I have to be, thoughtful about it, because they live in a culture in which it's okay to think that way, to minimize or deflect your feelings. But it isn't what it fucking is. This is horrible is what it is, I really want to help people just be with that. And so I really love your term. And I'm going to quote you on it, Carmen: toxic positivity.
Unfortunately, I didn't come up with it.
Okay, I heard it from you first.
Quite a while.
That's great. I also want to come back to something that Caira said. Caira, I wrote it in the chat. I love your using the term unhealthy coping mechanisms. And I'll tell you why I love it, is that they are unhealthy, but we're coping. We're coping the best we can. Every one of us has dealt with depression or anxiety and or PTSD and or addiction and or attentional problems. Just go down the list. And we're all trying to cope as best we can. And so if we can find some kind of stance that acknowledges that, as messed up as this looks from the outside, I'm just trying to stay above water. That's the start, it seems like to me, for a compassionate, caring response, rather than it is what it is, or why the hell are you acting so weird, Bob? It may be unhealthy, and that's fine. Let's acknowledge that. But can we please acknowledge that when people are suffering, we're all trying to make it through the night. We're all just trying to do the best we can, damn it.
Exactly. No, that's exactly it. I mean, when I get frustrated because I have various friends of various races and creeds and what have you, but also had another discussion with a friend of mine who was an older white woman, and she said as well, like, she once saw something where someone posted about after the Black Lives Matter issue that happened a couple of months ago, where there was a line of white people standing in front of a crowd of black people, all linked arm in arm, as sort of protectors. And a person of color commented on that and said, oh, look, it's white savior syndrome, it's white guilt. And then she said to me, like, she's confused now, because what does she do next? And I mean, that's a completely separate conversation, obviously, but I'm still frustrated by the fact that we cannot acknowledge privilege while also saying that, yes, you have privilege, in the fact that, the color of your skin makes you different, and people look differently at you, act differently towards you, don't expect you to have a certain accent when you speak, or assume that you must have grown up here or done this or whatever, or that you're going to steal something when you walk into a shop. Yes, there are those things, but other assumptions are also still made about you. And you can acknowledge that privilege while still saying, guess what, some things have been hard for me, but not in the same way that they've been hard for you. And that's a conversation that we need to have, is acknowledging privilege and seeing the difference between privilege and struggle. That I am still more privileged than a lot of people who live in my same neighborhood, because I got an education, I got to go to university, and I managed to pay my student loans, and I have now made a career out of that. I'm still a penniless writer, but if they had told me that in high school, before I decided to be a journalist, I might have changed my mind, but I am where I am now. But I've made something out of that. And I know so many people who went to high school with me who are just making it, or who are just getting by. And we grew up in the same neighborhood. We went to the same high school. We had similar opportunities, or we had different opportunities because of different things, or because of the fact that my dad had died. So my mom qualified for me to get the student loan. And yes, I had to pay it back, but I still got the student loan to be able to go and study.
Yeah.
Whereas the kid up the street who has two living parents who are both working just cannot, make it to get that student loan kind of thing. Or didn't have good enough marks to get the bursary or whatever it was. So there are different levels of privilege, even with mental health, where my depression might not be as severe as, someone who is a paranoid schizophrenic, for instance. Someone who has multiple personality disorder, someone who has borderline personality disorder. There might be varying things. There might be people who are dealing with 4 or 5 mental illnesses all at once, and have been for their entire lives, and are now just used to the fact that this is what my life is like, and have had no education about it, and are just called the weird person that lives down the street, because nothing has been done to help them. Nothing has been done to give them resources, to educate them, to educate their family, to say that, no, your child isn't stupid. No, your child is not, a little otherwise kind of thing. Your child is autistic, or your child has a learning disability. If you teach your child this way, or if you put your child on medication, or if you take this child to someone who is specially trained to teach them, they can have a normal life, or they can have at least a semblance of a normal life. They can experience things like neurotypical people. But because we do not have the resources, we do not have those privileges of being educated and being told that this is okay, that these things happen.
I think the education thing is a big factor. Like, let's say, okay, in this case scenario, in most of our areas in South Africa that don't have access to medical care, medication and diagnosis, at least then if we had resources to get information, to consume, and getting access to that information from the right people, like if we had like a Dr. Bob in each, rural area, or, especially now that government sent all the public schools home, so they're not getting, education there either. Not that every rural area even was going to public school, but they were able to either. I mean, we have areas in South Africa where they can't even get to a school because they don't have the transport to. Anyway, but if there was, at least some like more ways of getting educated. I mean, there are wonderful people who are doing wonderful things. Don't get me wrong, but there's not enough. And this lack of getting educated on mental health is also probably one of the biggest reasons for shame and stigma. As you know, and then in your more privileged communities, this whole thing of I think okay, no, I won't single out, but this thing of we know so and so is on the spectrum or whatever, but we don't dare talk about it, and or if you're diagnosed with whatever bipolar, I mean, I'm sure during lockdown, a lot of people have, developed some form of whatever, PTSD. I'm sure most of us have. I'm pretty sure I've developed PTSD from the bloody trauma I've been going through.
Yeah, well, you probably had it already, you just didn't know it.
When I had to give up smoking, I went, I don't know how to say a word without being demeaning, but I felt like I was going psychotic. I had family members and friends saying to me, like, Caira, we actually need to just not speak to you for a while. Like, contact us once the nicotine has.
This is what I haven't quit.
I broke up with boyfriends, and anyway, but so I'm pretty sure the mental health stuff was very real. But then, people who've developed whatever and haven't gotten a proper education for, getting educated on it. Thank God for the Lockdown Open Up group and connecting with people like Dr. Bob and life coaches, and then other people like myself who were wanting to get help and information because we're stuck in lockdown and isolation. And I'm feeling things in my head the way that I haven't really felt before, and it's now magnified to epic proportions. So there's not a I'm going to do this by myself. So getting educated really helps, and actually, I've grown.
I have a question for you, Caira, but also for you, Carmen. I wonder if there's a parallel in South Africa, and forgive me, I do read about South African developments because of my close friendship with 𝗪𝗏𝗪, who lives nearby you guys in Cape Town, and but I don't feel as literate as I probably ought to be. In the U.S., we have this phenomenon right now. We have a significant portion of our country. It's sometimes associated with regions of our country, and I won't name those for a desire to live longer. But we have a significant portion of our population that is anti-education, and it's infiltrated the highest levels of politics for the first time to this extreme in a generation, and many people would say ever, and that's probably not inaccurate. Is there any parallel? I'll put this to you, Carmen, because you've given so much thought to this idea of education, and Caira, it was inspired by what you were saying as well. I'd love to hear your response. Is there any parallel in South Africa? Obviously, we have a huge funding problem in the U.S. of funding education, just exactly what Caira was saying. And then the irony on top of ironies is that we have an administration and a significant portion of our population that actually support sticking your head in the sand. And I'm just curious if any comments you have, Carmen, and also Caira, and then we'll wind down in about 5-10 minutes, you guys, okay? But Carmen, any thoughts about kind of the anti-education obscurantism? Let's stick our head in the sand.
What's that word? There's a word for it. It's called
we call it obscurantism in academics. It's just where you want to obscure knowledge. Anti-intellectualism, we can go down the list, but also, well, I'll leave it at that. Carmen.
I don't think we have the exact same problem here.
Hallelujah.
Well, it's still a problem though, because
okay.
I think with us, it's literally just, listen, for the last 26 years, we've been trying to get by. Yeah. We've been trying to do as best we can, because so many people keep going on about, no, but apartheid is over. Racism shouldn't be a thing anymore. We're healed from that now, kind of thing. It's like, no, we're not. It's the same thing as, 13 years ago, my dad died saving my life, and I'm still damaged from that. And yes, I've gone through the process of working through the trauma and all of those things, but it doesn't leave you. It doesn't. And I've spoken to my niece who was born after my dad died, and she feels sad that she never got to meet him and speak to him. And those are the long-lasting effects of what happened. And she's not old enough yet to know the full story. I don't know if she has been told the full story yet, but I don't think she's old enough yet to be told the full story. And one day I will explain everything to her from my side. But that kind of thing, that's a trauma that's going to sit with a family. It's not just me. And comparing that, for instance, to 50, 60 years of, apartheid, and then never mind the fact that even before apartheid officially began, there was hundreds of years of oppression. Foreigners coming here and taking our land and all these other things that happened. And then we had apartheid, and it was made criminal to be a person of color, basically. We were treated differently. We were told we cannot be educated in the same way. We were told we cannot fall in love with people of different races. Having a relationship with a white person was illegal, and the white person wouldn't go to jail. You would. Those kinds of things, there's all that trauma, and we're still dealing with all of that, going through. How the hell did these people think that this was fucking okay? Yeah. How did anybody think that telling people how to live, where to live, that, oh no, you can't live in this specific area of land, your house is going to be demolished, even though you're already a family of 9 who live in a 2-bedroom flat. And yes, you're quite happy here, but we're going to knock down this entire building and ship you off far out into the suburbs, where it makes it more difficult for you to get to work, even though you earn less. We're going to give you more issues. We're going to give you, like, we're just going to make it harder for you to exist, basically, because these should be privileges for people who look like us, not people who look like you. And we're still dealing with that. And a lot of us still have anger around that. And I think this is also why there isn't that conversation of, yes, you're white and you're privileged, but it doesn't mean that your feelings aren't justified. I think that's why that conversation cannot happen yet, because people are still so angry that they cannot see past that anger. And so we're dealing with all of that. Mental health goes on the back burner. Nobody has time to think about, you couldn't remember a word today because you were anxious and depressed. Nobody cares. And then that might be a sign of early onset dementia or something. Nobody cares. You just need to keep on working, because that's what we do. We work until we cannot work anymore because you need to provide. And there is no space for talking about mental health and why it is important and how to heal yourself and how to have a better relationship with yourself and with the people around you, and how to just make that better, because it's not important.
Yeah. Caira, do you have any thoughts? I really appreciate your response, Carmen. Any thoughts about this whole thing of sticking our head in the sand versus educating ourselves and responding with concrete caring?
It becomes so much bigger than our. Carmen and I were saying earlier that, in these conversations, I think this is also why I keep thinking back to our conversation with Guy as well, Dr. Bob, with why it's so important for us to listen with open-mindedness and to speak with open hearts, because when we feel strongly about things as well, and especially when reacting to a way that we feel maybe we've suddenly come up with what we think is a great, fantastic idea to solve the problems of all problems. I think we just have to be careful when trying to offer solutions, because this is, especially in a pandemic where, as Carmen says, people are angry, people are upset, things are multifaceted and complex, and it's, I think, almost impossible for one entity to try and govern or give a solution to all peoples. And it does become a combination of, or a point, as we've learned now, for all of us to just, turn towards ourselves and go, not stick our head in the sand, but what can we do in our own capacity now to get educated and to speak to the people we know and trust, identify people who we can get information from, and ask questions when we don't have to trust everyone. And maybe what you've been believing your whole life, maybe you're starting to question that. And if you want to ask that question, someone asks you a question, don't shame someone if they don't necessarily if they're questioning it. I think that's a big that's been a common thing. I've seen things on social media, and especially in comment sections, where the majority of people all agree with a statement, and then one person will go, but hang on, just putting this out there, but the sky might be blue, but whatever, and then everyone argues about it. And it's, I think we've just got to be mindful of so many different feelings, thoughts, experiences, pasts, colors. There's different ways to love people, and we've just got to be thoughtful of that whilst looking after ourselves. And
can I add one more thing to that?
Yeah, this will be our final comment, and then we'll wind up. I want to add a parenthetical comment, Carmen. I made a mistake while right in between you speaking, Carmen, and Caira. I wanted to cite a poem that's so applicable. It's by D.H. Lawrence, the British novelist. And I posted it, and it went sideways in StreamYard because it's too freaking long, and I apologize for that. And maybe I don't know. It just went. It just created a whole mess. But it's about what we're talking about. Carmen, I want you to speak, and as you're speaking, I'm going to see if I can break this poem into smaller segments because I'd love people to read it. It's really meant as a postscript to everything that you said, Carmen. I've been so touched by your articulation, by your deep heart, by your advocacy. I'm really, really honored to meet you. I wish I had known your dad too. Yeah.
You would have got a kick out of him.
yeah. And I want to give you the last word. And Caira, I hope that, as with previous guests, I feel it so strongly with Carmen, that if you're open, Carmen, it would be wonderful to have you come back again, and literally any time, because we've just scratched the surface of such a deep, deep issue. So to you, Carmen, and I'm going to try to break down this poem, and I may fail at that too. Okay, but please, I'm listening to you, just trying to publish a poem that's about what we're talking about. Please continue, Carmen. Okay, yeah.
So I was going to add to what Caira said, is that with the thing of having compassion for people and knowing that everyone has a different point of view and a different frame of mind and all the other things. It's like, yes, have compassion, be aware and be open. And we should stop shaming people all the time, but also knowing that before you say something, and it sounds a little bit like, okay, am I going to get attacked on Twitter for this? Are my Facebook friends going to be like, dude, no. Or does this meme not look okay? Like, if you have to even question for a second that it is problematic, don't. Yeah. And if you need to, ask a person who is affected by that kind of thing. Ask a person of color, ask a mentally ill person, ask whoever you might know, someone who is more educated than you in that sphere of things, and just go, listen, I wanted to talk about this thing, but this is how I want to say it. Is that okay? And if that person goes, no, dude, then don't. But then also be open to having that conversation with someone else. And Caira, like we were saying earlier, doing the not listen to respond, but listen to understand. Listen to have a conversation back and forth. We're doing now, where we all talk to each other and we're all listening and understanding and having a valuable conversation, even though the three of us are very different people and we come from very different places, and we have very different experiences. We can come together in the fact that we know what mental illness is like, we know what addiction is like, we have that thing of we are all advocates and activists and that kind of thing, and we want to have this discussion, and that is important. So we're coming together to have that discussion, and we're all listening to each other and having that communication and having that discussion, and that should be what is at the forefront of every single conversation you have with anyone who is different, who acts different, who comes from a different time or era or area or whatever it is. It should be about having open and honest communication between two or more people, where it's not just going, no, but go read this thing because this is what this person said. No, tell me what you are saying right now. And let's talk about this right now as two people who are in front of each other and having this conversation. Don't talk down to me and I won't talk down to you. We'll have a conversation with each other. And if someone says to you that something you've said is hurtful, listen and apologize properly. And make amends.
Jordan,
You guys, I'm going to have to go. You guys, I have to go. I'm sorry. I'm off to another educational group right now. Carmen, this is beautiful. Thank you so much. Words of wisdom and very practical. Might we all put these into practice, dear one. Caira, thank you for bringing on Carmen. It's really wonderful to meet you, Carmen. More to follow. I'm hoping we can have a part 2, okay? I've got to go right now, unfortunately. I want to wish both of you blessings. Be safe, be well, okay, in South Africa. Lots of love to both of you. Much respect, much respect. Take care. Bye-bye for now, you guys. Bye-bye.